from Arizona, Representative Trent Franks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me, Mr. Speaker, if I could just express a sincere gratitude to Congressman Walker for leading this effort tonight. The people of North Carolina did a very wise thing to send this man to Congress. He has represented them faithfully, and he is a Valley Forge American that I wish there were more like in the United States Congress. Mr. Speaker, the direction of America and the world under the leadership of Barack Obama is alarming to any reasonable observer. And to those outside the Beltway, Republicans seem weak and unwilling to effectively respond. One of the hidden in plain sight reasons for this false perception is the rules and present practices in the United States Senate controlling the parliamentarian instrument of the, quote, motion to proceed to consider. This is the mechanism that allows the filibuster in the United States Senate. Mr. Speaker, just very briefly, it takes 60 votes to allow a bill to come to the floor for debate in the United States Senate. It takes a vote of 60 votes to allow that bill to be actually voted upon. The truth is that with 54 Republicans, it takes 6 Democrats to help allow either debate or a vote to occur in the United States Senate. And unfortunately, regardless of the nature of the bills, in recent years, this simply has not been allowed to occur. And Mr. Speaker, this has become a boot on the throat of the Constitution and a stalemate to this republic. And I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that if we don't change it, the people of this country are going to become so wearied of this process, so convinced that we will remain in gridlock forever, that they will simply wash their hands of the American government. And if they do that, then the Founding Fathers' dream itself could die in this generation. It must not be allowed to happen. To make this in practical terms, Mr. Speaker, the House of Representatives passed some months ago the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. The only thing that we did using our Article I powers of the purse was to say that we would not fund the President's illegal, unconstitutional executive order on immigration. That bill then went over to the Senate, fully funding the Department of Homeland Security. And Democrats in the Senate said, no, we're not voting on the bill. You guys are shutting the government down. You see, Democrats want very much to shut this government down because they know that the left-wing media will make sure that Republicans are fully blamed for that reality. That's what they want. It is not a deterrent to them. It is an inducement. And so, Mr. Speaker, the choice for House leadership is either to the bill down so the Democrats will support it and thereby completely make the Republican base heartbroken, or shut the government down, allow the government to be shut down. And no one is accountable under this scenario, and it has to change, Mr. Speaker. For my Republican friends that say, well, what if we're in the minority? Well, we've been in the minority, and Obamacare passed, all of these other things passed, because unfortunately the willingness of the Senate Democrats today to abuse this filibuster is so prevalent that it stops anything of consequence that matters to this country. And, Mr. Speaker, that has to change. Under the current rules and practices, the balance between the reasonable opportunity to deliberate or debate and the ability to actually make a timely decision in the U.S. Senate no longer exists. The technical remedy to fix this is to adopt a change in the rules that will satisfy both the majority and the minority, prevent gridlock, and allow for consensus and the spirit of bipartisanship to return. So tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, I will be introducing a resolution calling upon the Senate to adjust their rules to prevent this mindless stalemate and the practice of the current rules as written. The goal, Mr. Speaker, is not to do away with the Senate filibuster, but to maintain the ability of the minority to have leveraged objection to either majority overreach or deeply contested legislation while restoring the accountability and deliberation to what is called the world's most deliberative body. Mr. Speaker, I have one last example. Almost 2 months ago, this House passed the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. We have passed many bills that have never gotten to see the light of day in the Senate because of the Senate filibuster. The Abortion Survivors Protection Act required that babies surviving an abortion be given the same treatment and care that would be given to any child born naturally premature at the same age. This bill now languishes in the Senate, and it is uncertain if it will even be allowed a fair and honest debate up or down. These are born alive children, Mr. Speaker, born alive, and no one can obscure the humanity and personhood of born alive babies or claim that there's a conflict that exists between now separate interests of the mother and the child. Nor can they take refuge within the schizophrenic paradox Roe v. Wade has subjected this country to for now more than 4 decades. Mr. Speaker, protecting born alive survivors of abortion is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It is a test of our basic humanity and who we are as a human family. And before my colleagues in the Senate vote against this bill, or far worse, do as they've done so often and use the Senate rules to filibuster and avoid a vote, and to deprive this bill of an honest debate and a fair vote, I would implore each one of them to ask themselves 2 questions in the stillness of their own heart. First, is turning our backs on the most helpless of our born alive children truly who the United States of America has become? Second, is voting against or filibustering against a bill to protect born alive human babies from agonizing dismemberment and death who they have become as a Senate and who they want to be remembered for? Mr. Speaker, it is time that we recognize that there are certain bills that are worth a vote. Bills like protecting this country from a potential Iranian nuclear option. Bills like protecting this country from allowing its little born alive children to be killed. Mr. Speaker, that time has come.